and welcome to episode 7. That's a whole week of daily updates. Who thought that would happen? Not me. But they've been pretty fun. And today I thought I'd talk quickly about something that I've grown to love very much in the last 3 years. Is a role-playing game called Dungeons and Dragons. And when I grew up, it was seen as very underground, nerdy, and only certain people with no friends would play it with their friends. So how did they not have any friends if they had friends? And they would go into like basements in the dark and play these weird games, and people were very weird when they played it. And but because I grew up around fantasy novel readers and storytellers and that, we played a smaller version of it called Tunnels and Trolls, and my brother played Dungeons and Dragons, and it's now gone through 5 different rule changes, I suppose, and so now they're at 5th edition, and that's when I got into it, almost 3 years ago. And the basic premise is group storytelling, and all role-playing games is that. And when you read the introduction to the rule book, it talks about how in the 70s all of these dudes would come together and wish that they could be in these books or create in these books or play in these books. And so they created different rule systems and used different dice to enable players to have a sense of chance, that the dice could change how the story went, and then you had to go with that story. And basically you can play it in your head, and people use different types of dice to control different character types. Ooh, I should have got a character sheet. Maybe I'll run and get that. But it's played with these like normal dice and quite specific dice like this. This is a D20. So you can roll it, and then that's a 9. Oh, that's not even on camera. That's a 9. And so the story is told by a dungeon master or a game master, and then the players who have chosen their character and like limits to their character tell the dungeon master what their character does in response to what the dungeon master has said. And because now we have 3D printers that print cool stuff, and we can bring some of the imagine out into the real world, a lot of us don't just play in our heads. We play with little boards like this. This was made by a guy called Marius, and Urta made this, I think. And you should look them up online. I've forgotten their monikers. Gorgeous Barbarian is one of them, and Lapinucus, I think, is the other. But basically you have these squares which mark out different movement, and of course you have a giant bottle of Coca-Cola in the background of all games. You have to, that's a must. And so, for example, if a dungeon master was to say, you're in a flat field, covered in dirt, you don't see any grass, and in the middle of it is not a desolate tree, like a dead tree with no leaves. And alright, we kind of had some technical difficulties, but from the desolate tree, you could have a field, and the desolate tree, the different characters would have to respond to the desolate tree. And then sometimes we get into dungeons like this, and you have different classes, and you have different skill sets. So in a battle, if these two wanted to battle it out, you could roll a dice, and it comes up 15, and then adding to that 15 would be your, if you were good with the weapon you were using, how strong you would hit, etc., etc. Then you would use different dice to determine damage. So we have 6s, 10s, 12s. And depending on what your character has, that does damage to the creature, and then the creature or the person dies or does not die. And so sometimes you have little scenes like this, and the story progresses in ways that sometimes the party dies and sometimes the bad guys die, or sometimes the bad guys aren't actually bad. The player characters have just made them bad, and it's funny but frustrating as a Dungeon Master watching your players kill characters that were supposed to be a part of the storyline later on, and so then it's also figuring out a skill of improvising but also sticking to the story that you've planned, because sometimes you've taken hours and hours and hours to plan these stories and understand these stories, so to have a character just run in and stab everyone, then you're just left with nothing. And I love the game because if you get a squad who understands the story but also understands that they can ruin it if they want, then the push and shove of storytelling together is what fascinates me the most. And so I've loved it. And so I've had a few different crews over the years of like, we'll go on a 5-month campaign and we'll meet up once or twice a week, and you get to know them and they get to know you, and you get to know the story and you get to know your characters, and it's as if you're actually walking through a novel or a story. And it's different to playing an RPG online by yourself, and it's different because that you don't get to create that, you just have to interact with it. Whereas in roleplay games, not just Dungeons and Dragons, you get to create whatever you want. And it's so good. And like, you do have purists who want the rules to make sense to the rules, which is great, and that like if it's set in the year 4000 BC and there's no electricity, and then you throw in like sequined pants, then some players are like, that doesn't make sense. But then some players will just roll with it because it's funny, and it's all about the fun anyway. And so it's been interesting seeing different personalities come out too, and different storytelling types. Like you have the types who don't say anything until there's a fight, and then you have these players who will do large speeches once a session, and the speeches are very eloquent and very like inspiring, but then the rest of the game they're just like, oh well, I'll just walk along. And then I've had some players who draw their characters within like 5 minutes of starting the game, and it's like, hey, look at my character, I know exactly what they look like. But then some characters I've played, like the other day, my dungeon master asked, oh, what colours are your character wearing? Because she made a miniature of us. And I was like, I don't know what I look like. And whenever I did imagine what I looked like, I was imagining it like a completely different race. Like I think I'm a half-orc now, and I was just imagining my brother, but like beefier, because it's like he's a tall paladin who just is nice and stabs people sometimes, and I was like, that's like my brother. But I'm actually a half-orc, so my skin has to be a different colour, and I have to have like teeth, I think. Anyway, so that was interesting. But yeah, so I just love this game because it gives people a safe place to perform and to create, and it gives friendships a go when friendships wouldn't have been there. And that's what I love about a lot of things I do, that I meet people that I would never have chosen because they run in circles that I don't run, but just because of this weird, like twice a year, one of the board game shops here runs this fiesta that like 100 people come and play multiple games over the night or over the day. And this last time I ran a game with a guy that was still in high school, a guy that was studying psychology, I think, or computing, and then a resident doctor who knew Camilla but not directly. And I was like, I would never meet you people. Like, there's no way I would meet you people, but we get to spend 4 hours creating something together. And they took it in places that I didn't imagine they would, which was so good. So, Dungeons and Dragons, good times. And now with technology, the other day we played it online, and it was janky because we didn't know how to use the system. But it means that even if we're coronavirused and quarantined, we can still play it. And like I haven't figured out the platform we were using, so I was just like gonna Skype my players into like a live stream of this. What's it called? A map or a? Hang on, is that even it, or is that a bag? You can't even see it. This thing, I don't know what it's called. Tile thing. Who even knows? So Good times. Also, we got a delivery from our favourite bakery, Druska Milte and Vandois, which is salt, flour, water in Lithuanian, and they make the best cinnamon buns in the country. And we found the other day they were like, "Yeah, we deliver," and so we're like, "Yes!" So we had some English muffins this morning for breakfast from them, and then a ton of good stuff yesterday. While we were watching this show, 100 people or 100 humans. And they're just like figuring out answers to questions you've always had by asking 100 humans. It's a very odd show. It's very cheesy and American in some moments, which is good sometimes. Okay, Bumblebee Tuna, and good to see ya.